Today we'll be taking a look at the classic standard Madera, a true classic. While this isn't a true first generation standard Madera, it is a redesigned version, and we'll kind of count both of them considering that it's virtually the same thing. The only difference is the outer design, as you can see. Since we're talking about overall design, let's take a look at it now. Got that classic octagonal shaped base, and nothing really on the sides. I do like the front of it though, in the base, which is pretty cool. Now, the older ones from the 30s and early to mid 40s had more of a fancier design with the accents on the bottom. But besides that, it looks about the same as this. As we go inside the bowl, the trapway opening is a pretty standard curved lip. And since this is a straight down flushing toilet, it has straight down room jets. Now let's get to a flush. As you saw there, it had a pretty straight down flush, but despite that, it's still kind of exciting. Now, one thing to point out about the flushes is that they're different. This one kind of has a shorter siphon, although sometimes when it has a little bit more water, it could tend to go on for a little bit longer and have a pretty good pull as well, thanks to the front jets, as you saw there. We'll take a look at it again. The front jets definitely do help out with the pull and stuff, as this thing does not have it exposed. Siphon jets, they're actually tucked in the back of the lip here, behind the trapway. One thing I really love about these are the performance. These things, while they're not impossible to clog, are pretty hard to clog. These things are super reliable and they have pretty strong performances for what they are. Again, impossible to clog? No, but definitely a very great performance. And you can definitely thank the trapway for that, even though it doesn't really look that big at first. Now, while we're on the topic of bowrings, you notice that this thing has straight down pointed jets, which is kind of a pet peeve of mine, as you probably have noticed throughout these videos. But let's take a look at it here. For jets pointed down, this actually seems to have pretty good bowrings, which is quite surprising because even some toilets from this timeline don't often have great bowrings. So I'm shocked that something with pointed down jets rinses as well as it does. And that is the standard Madera, a true classic. I always have and will love these toilets, even when some of their circumstances don't often line up, like with minimal water usage and stuff like that. But besides that, this is a true classic, and honestly, its later version from the 60s and 70s doesn't really do it justice. This will always be a true classic. Now let's put it into the grading scale and let's grade it. The overall design of the standard Madera is nice. I really do like the octagonal base, and it makes it stand out. Even though this was a common design choice in the mid-1900s, it's still pretty nice, and I give it a 7. Quality control on these are pretty good. I wouldn't say perfect, but they're pretty good. They function well, they flush well, but it really often depends on what kind of flush you're giving it. If you're obviously giving a short flush, the quality control will be a lot worse. But in standard conditions, these do work pretty well. You might have some slight defects with the ram jets, like I actually noticed while watching the video of this standard Madera again, that it has a slight bit of an angle to its front jets, but that's kind of it, with maybe the slight outlier every once in a while, but I give it an 8. These are some very consistent toilets. Now, I wouldn't say completely perfect, because you might have that occasional deformed trapway every now and then, but that's kind of the only drawback I could think of this. Everything you see is pretty dang accurate, and you can't really complain about very good consistency, so I give it a 9. While I don't know the exact trapway size this is, the opening and passages are definitely pretty good size. Definitely not the biggest ever, but can definitely get things done. If only you can really see a trapway passage outline but you really can't. I give it a 7 though because the driveway is pretty good size. While the flush might look typical to most people, the front jets really is what helps out the flush be pretty good. It's not the most exciting flush ever, but if you got really good pressure, these things can have pretty good flushes. It's pretty much the same thing as the Virgin Crane Santon I reviewed. Without those front jets, the flush would not be that exciting, and would probably be worse off without it. And that's kind of the case with this. The flush gets an 8. Considering how the front jets do help aid the flush, the pull and siphon are pretty fine sometimes. Although it really depends on how this thing kind of flushes, because if you have less water, like this one for example, well, maybe the pull won't be as good as others, even though the front jets do help out a little bit, which might cause some shredding every now and then, though thankfully not as common as its later versions from the 60s and 70s. With that in mind though, I can't really give this score an 8, rather a 7. I definitely think the Virgin Crane Santon does better in terms of pull. I don't think I really need to explain how great the performance is. It's not unstoppable per se, but it is pretty great. Now, compare this to something like the later flushometer cadets that Americans generally make, and yeah, they would easily get beaten in a contest. But these things are pretty hard to clog in general. Not impossible, but pretty hard. These things have great performances, and they usually stand the test of time. Because of that, I have to give it a 9. Now, I'd figured the ball-runs wouldn't be as good, but I gotta be surprised. The ball-runs is actually pretty adequate for what this toilet is. Yeah, the straight-down jets don't really help out that much, and some areas might be missed, but looking at it, it does look pretty sufficeable. I wouldn't say completely perfect, but considering what it is, it does have pretty good rinse. Not perfect, but good. I'd give it a 7. Yeah, these things could survive for a very long time. I mean, yeah, some scum innovations will happen every now and then, and it'll get pointlessly replaced with a factually worse toilet. But let's be real here. If you put this in an actual bathroom and you don't touch it, these things will last a very good long time. There are still plenty of these in existence, and there's probably the most common toilet of the mid-1900s I've ever seen. I can't really explain that for everyone else, but it is a very common toilet from this time period, and there's still a lot around to this very day. It tells you how strong these really are, and how they were built to last. These things have some great staying power, and I have to give them a 9. I don't think I really need to say much about its value, because these things are true classics. Sure, some categories might not be as perfect compared to some other toilets from other companies or later generations, but these are true classics. Great flush, even though the flush style isn't the most exciting, great performance, and even sufficeable ball runs. These things have pretty good staying power, look nice, and it's just a true classic of its time. There is a fine, good reason these are hyped up, because these are great toilets that stand the test of time. And that's something I can't really say about its later generations, especially the 60s and 70s, which do have their own problems, which I'll discuss in later reviews. But the standard version, true classic. You can't get any better than this, and it gets a 9. The final score of the redesigned first generation Standard Madera, or American Standard Madera, whatever you want to say, is an 80 out of 100. This thing is a true classic. While it might not be the most perfect toilet ever made, there is a good reason why a lot of these are still around to this very day. These things hold up exponentially well. And that's something I can't really say about every Madera. These are true classics. Cherish them while they still exist.